morning, Pardis. This is Himmelgabes here. It's actually morning when I'm doing this recording again. Jesus, what a surprise. Um, the video in front of you is a compilation of several days worth of faction ranking missions. I didn't have time to do each one separately, so I just threw them together like this, and I'm going to do a commentary on top of it because I'm at home right now. I don't have my friend Effectus to borrow music from, and I thank him for the other music he's done for my other videos. Um, so just ranking through, it's fun doing that. Um, it can be difficult though, especially for when you're in a rust fire or smaller ship. Deciding between, well, do I do a assassination rank, which is killing NPCs, or do I package rank? And it's just you know the point, and at my point where I am right now is I'm doing both at the same time, and so yeah, I get some more missions in, but it can be more difficult because I can killing enemies, you run out of APs faster. Faction ranking, your cargo bay is full of unidentified faction important materials, and there's the end of one set. This is another one. They're going real fast, just to try and make the video as unwieldy as, well, not that, more wieldy as, not as unwieldy as it could be there. I'm sorry, it is early in the morning for me at this point. Um, so yeah, you notice I'm just doing a big circle around the Union Keldon core, starting in Sirius, working up through the starbase in Sirius, and going through Bellatrix. And then usually at that point, depending on what I've got, I'll either go to um, Lazib, or I'll go into Tarius, and then up through Nashira, and back down through and into Sirius. So it's a pretty decent loop. And one of the reasons it works really well is that, um, being centered around the faction homeworld, or I guess this cluster homeworld, most of the most of the planets and star bases are kept, stocked and stuff, so they're higher population, which means more missions, and that's extremely helpful, especially when you compare it to, say, my Orion character, which is a neutral, and trying to rank up competency on him is almost impossible because the neutral zone is small, and you'll have clusters where they'll be like relatively decent sized, but for some reason they just it's the wild zones, I guess you could say, of the Pardis universe, and there's smaller places and harder enemies in some cases, and it's more fun that way, I guess you could say, but it certainly does make it difficult for those of us that are not allowed in faction areas. And I don't know. Hopefully, this is helpful for some of the newer players if you'll take a look at this. But it is going by rather fast. Just scroll through. Make sure you do that loop, whatever. So yeah, that's the most important thing, I think. If I could stress anything, and doing your ranking, is to get a layout of especially the area you're in, and work that. Don't try and go around, or just once you figure out a loop that works pretty well and it's a decently sized loop, just keep it there. Don't and you see it later on sometimes where I overstretch and I try and do too much, and that can be a problem, honestly, because you end up running short of APs. Sometimes you fail missions that way. So that's one thing to be aware of, and that's what comes with experience, honestly. It's just how much. Here's another set we're doing, but it's just the number of missions you can do is dependent on how big, basically what's available, how big your cargo bay is, and if you're doing killing missions, how many APs it takes to kill something. Okay, yeah, I can get a mission to kill, and get 20 missions to kill 15 you know um, space maggots, but the problem is at that point there's so many that I have to take care of that you run, it's just not worth it, because at this point on my character, you know, it can still take me 10 to 15 rounds to kill a space maggot, which I mean isn't great, but for the weaponry I have, that's not bad. You know, at a point where you get up where you have real decent weapons, you know, 1 round for a space maggot is normal. And so, you know, then it's like, well, you know, kill 15 space maggots. Yay, that's wonderful, because that's like, you know, the equivalent of maybe 20 rounds of APs, which is what it would take for one boss, you know, one not boss, but one NPC of a higher level. Um, so that's an interesting part there. I think, yeah, this is one of the runs where I get within sight of the end. I cut it a little too close, killing and package-wise, and I almost don't make it. And you can see the reason why is that I did my loop and I doubled back on myself and I went too far back. You know, if I'd gone back to Nashira instead of going all the way back around, it would have been better. You know, it's just one of those you gotta balance. Okay, well, you know, how far back? And if you've got like if you have a decent number of missions you've collected, sometimes it's not wise to try and go back and pick up some, because A, there won't be some there, and B, there's a chance to run out of APs. And so that's what you have to be careful of. I think this is just my part 1. Oh yeah, I don't quite get this kill. I don't think. Yeah, I didn't get that kill there, and I missed that one. That was just a case of running out of APs. Here, see, I do change my thing up a little bit. That's because first mission off Sirius was to go to this Gianna or Guyana, whatever it is. And so I do take that one. In the meantime, I help somebody out, planet not taken right, which is, you know, I didn't plan on doing a lot of missions this time around. And so, you know, that extra credits is always a good thing, especially when you can help someone keep their planet from starting a downward slide. So at some point when I get a bigger ship and a little easier carrying, um, you know, easier killing wise, I'll expand my loop from Sirius, Bellatrix, Lizzie, Nashira, Terias, Bellatrix, Sirius, Guyana, and then the one that's between Guyana and Sirius down below. Can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's one with a bunch of numbers. And, you know, expand the loop out to that, which helps out a few missions. It can, but then there's also when you get higher level, you start losing. I mean, you don't start losing, but the number of missions available stays the same, but the missions become more dispersed and harder to take care of, and it makes life much more exciting. You see here I'm playing around with a few levels to try and get the max out of my ship, because I know that in a faction area I don't have to worry about making sure I have enough fuel to, you know, go through a sector that's been, you know, strip mined, which doesn't usually happen in faction areas unless there's a pirate around, and most pirates don't make it this deep, at least into Union territory. At least not that I've seen, but I mean it's possible, but most don't. Here's another set of ranking. You know, I think I started at a different place that time, so that's always fun. Oh, this is a short video because it was a little snippet of faction ranking I did. Just a crap ton of, you know, that's when I got lucky, is when you get a lot of those, like, you know, space maggot kills. When you get a bunch of those stacked up, your ranking just exponentiates and how fast you go through it. Here's another set. This was a really long one I did. Part of the reason is my internet was real slow at the time, so it was taking a long time in between clicks to do it. It's about average, I think, in the number of missions completed. Honestly, I'm not really keeping track of that, which is neither here nor there, honestly, but it's just something I'm not keeping track of. But I have to say, probably completing an average of 10 missions probably per run if I start at the normal 5,500 APs, which, because I am a preemie, I do have that. Man, it's a lot of the same stuff, just repetition. And then that's where a lot of pilots, just give up because it's the same stuff day in and day out. Um, Especially at the beginning, yeah, I get a lot of the double APs, but I don't have access to a decent ship, really. I mean, the Marauder, which I gain access to, or I already have access to, is a decent ship, but for skilling or true, I'm going to go out and get some decent kills, it doesn't compare because it's a low-end faction ship. And so you've got to spend your time, ranking and getting your XP up in order to start flying the better ships, and that can be very time consuming and very boorish, I guess you could say. Not a lot of people want to go through the effort. Um, so it's just one of those. If you start, know that maybe in a couple of million AP, you'll eventually start seeing the light, and oh well, this is pretty cool. I'm flying that top end fighter, that flying a big brown box like some people do. That's where you see the reward, is when it's, you get around to what you really want to be doing. Space maggots and dragons. That's my life right now. And here's another. Yeah, we just started another part. I think it was number 10 out total or something. I don't know. I've lost track of how many ranking sessions I've done just because I've had to do so many. Especially when you efficiently rank, you end up where you just have several days of back-to-back double AP, which helps you because then you rank faster and you get your. It's just this cycle that eventually stops, because you end up having to do so many missions between levels that you can't, get a couple of ranks in the same amount of days. So yeah, just flying through. And the one thing I would recommend even to anybody when you start ranking is, yeah, shields are mainly, a union thing, but I always recommend, even if you don't have that much space, to get the bottom level shield you can, or whatever shield you can, just because it takes the edge off the damage and keeps you alive. There's another set. I think this is the last set in the video. Decent ranking. I wonder what that Marauder's doing there. Hopefully, there might be people ambushed under him, but I doubt it. Probably just ran out of APs, which is kind of common, especially for newer pilots at the lower levels, is to not judge your APs correctly. But I mean, it's not so much a big deal when you're under newbie protection, or when you're in a faction space. I mean, there are pilots in faction spaces, don't get me wrong, but they're fewer and far between. There's less people hunting for, trophy points. At my current level, we probably charge million and a half, maybe 2 million for my current, rank. And I mean, for some people that's not a lot of money, but for some pilots like myself, that is a significant amount of money there. I don't think between all three of my characters I have 1 million credits currently. Just my building's not ticking, and that's probably my biggest thing I dislike at this point, is the fact that hardly ever are my buildings actually ticking. And either here, I don't have any buildings built here, but especially in Orion, don't get me wrong, my alliance is great, but buildings not ticking is very irksome, because they are higher level buildings and they should be supporting my fighting, endeavors, but it ain't happening. And so, granted, it's an NPR alliance, neutral or North Partisan alliance, and so for some reason there's just a difference in their determination and stuff. So you see less of building upkeep sometimes. This about wraps it up, folks. Thanks for watching. Hope y'all liked it. Um, just keep chugging away, those of you that are playing. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.